Access to Democracy is made possible thanks to the following organizations. Sheridan & Dulas, PA, a family and criminal defense law firm that has been serving clients in Dakota County and throughout Minnesota for over 40 years. Ranked a Tier 1 Best Law Firm by U.S. News and World Report every year since 2009. Sheridan & Dulas are here to help you in your most difficult life circumstances. Established in 2007, 45th Parallel Distillery was among the first 50 micro-distilleries in the United States. Based in New Richmond, Wisconsin, all aspects of production occur at their facility. If you're interested in learning more about the 45th Parallel Distillery, please check their website and plan a visit to tour their facility and taste their spirits. Truestone Financial, with locations in Minnesota and Wisconsin, has proudly served its members since 1939. Truestone engages, educates, and supports its members to ensure they have the tools to empower their financial well-being. Truestone Financial, your neighborhood credit union. Learn more at truestone.org.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Access to Democracy. I'm your host, Steve Francisco. It's a pleasure to welcome to our studio today a face that may be familiar to many of you out there. He served a long time as the mayor of the city of St. Paul and previously served on the St. Paul City Council and is the CEO of Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity. Did I get that right, Chris?
You got it right, Steve.
Chris Coleman, our guest today on Access to Democracy. Welcome, Chris. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
We were just discussing that it's actually been quite a few years. You had been on the show previously with my colleague Alan Miller a long time ago, and we think it was before you were even mayor.
It might have been. It easily could have been over 20 years ago.
Yeah,
so
shows you how fast time
Well,
flies.
apparently I didn't do a good job last time.
No, I doubt that. So how many years were you on the city council? What years did you serve there, and when were you mayor?
Yeah, I was on the city council from 98 to 2003, 2004, and then was elected mayor in actually 20 years ago this November in 2005. Served in office from 2006 to 2018.
Wow. Good long times in public service. And for some people, some of our older viewers out there may recognize the name Coleman because your late father was the Senate Majority Leader in the Minnesota State Senate way back.
That's right, from 1972 to 1980. It was
Nick Coleman.
Nick Coleman.
Yeah, very good. You are the president and CEO of Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity. I think that most of our viewers probably have some idea what Habitat does, but could you tell us in your own words, what is the mission of Habitat for Humanity?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'll start a little bit with some of the background. Habitat for Humanity was kind of grew out of an organization called the Koinonia Farms in southern Georgia. It was a faith community, black and white folks living together, working together, praying together, eating together, getting paid the same. It was really kind of a radical notion at the time, and as a result of that, they were subject to shootings and fire bombings, and they were shunned.
Because it was an integrated group of people at a time of segregation.
Absolutely, and in one of the most racist counties in the United States of America. And there was only kind of one local businessman that would work with them, a guy named Jimmy Carter. And he got to know some of the leaders of what was then Koinonia Farms. And after that idea kind of went away, they started a mission over in Africa, and they called it the Fund for Humanity, when they started building homes over in Africa. After a while, they were collecting tithe from churches across the country to support their work over there. And a group in Florida and a group in Texas kind of simultaneously said, that's great that we're building homes in Africa, but we really have a huge need for affordable housing here in the United States of America. So that was back almost 50 years ago. And since that time, from those early kind of beginnings, it grew into affiliates across the country. At one time, there were almost 1,700 affiliates. It's now down to about 1,100 or so as some have merged. But the mission is to provide stable, safe, affordable for families housing and home ownership specifically, because it's one of the few ways that families can build equity that they can pass down to future generations.
Right. And you mentioned President Carter and his wife Rosalind too, probably the two most illustrious, famous volunteers that any nonprofit could ever claim, right?
Yeah, after the president left the White House in 1984, he was asked by the head of Habitat at that time to bring a group of folks up from Georgia to work on a rehab of a brownstone in New York. And President Carter and Rosalind came up to New York and slept on the floor of a church basement as the former president and first lady. And they worked for a week, and that started a 40-year tradition of what was called the Jimmy and Rosalind Carter Work Project that has gone across the globe, building houses for a week, bringing volunteers in. And we were fortunate to host it in the Twin Cities in 2010, and then again last year, we hosted it and had 1,000 volunteers a day come out to help us build houses on the east side of St. Paul.
That's tremendous. What a legacy President Carter had as a volunteer. I still see the images of him, the videos of him swinging a hammer well into his 80s, I believe.
90s.
90s
yeah,
even.
no, he
Of course,
worked
he lived to be 100 years old.
Yeah, he was up until the COVID shut down some of the builds for a couple of years. He was out there building. I think he was probably 96 or 97.
Remarkable.
Yeah.
So I'd like to talk to you today, Chris, so our viewers get a better understanding. We have an affordability crisis in our country. Why do we have this crisis of housing affordability? What are the factors that make it difficult or impossible for people to realize the American dream of home ownership?
Well, there's a short story, a long story. I'm going to try to give you a medium story.
Okay.
So when you think about housing in the United States of America, if you were in the 1950s, the average household size was 5 or 6 people. Now it's under 2. So if you take, and yet the population of the United States has grown substantially over that time. And so if you just start with the math, we have a lot fewer people living in about the same number of houses. So all of a sudden there's just a pressure on supply and demand, which is kind of interesting. But the costs have gone up substantially while wages haven't risen. When I started at Habitat in 2018, the average house in the Twin Cities was $170,000. That average cost now is almost or over perhaps $350,000. So that's this tremendous increase in the cost of housing, with wages almost stagnant during that same period of time.
And that
very little growth.
The increase in the cost of housing, we're talking about the materials that go into a home: lumber, shingles, siding, et cetera.
So from a construction standpoint, absolutely. All of those costs have gone up.
And labor.
Infrastructure, labor has gone up. But the reality of it is we're 30,000 plus units short of necessary housing in the state of Minnesota, and so just it's simple supply and demand, and the costs keep on going up. My wife is in the real estate business, and she's watching young kids struggling to try to keep up with the market, and having to offer tens of thousands of dollars over asking price just to be able to get a house because there's such a demand. So it's a factor of a lot of different things, but at the end of the day, all of the costs have gone up, but wages haven't, and so the gap between what a family can afford and what that house cost is just continues to grow.
I remember going back ancient times. My parents bought their first home in South Minneapolis in 1958, where I grew up, and I believe they paid at that time $8,000, which was the cost of a middle-income family home in South Minneapolis. Paid off their mortgage years later. But that was at a time when my mother wasn't working outside the home. She was raising my brother and sister and I. My dad was an aircraft mechanic for Northwest Airlines, so he had a good income and a good job. But today it's almost impossible for single income families to buy a home, isn't it?
Well, it's really challenging, and especially for young folks. I've watched as my own kids. One was able to buy a house, and one is hoping to buy a house someday. But right now, and one of the things, and this is an important part of why we do what we do, because I was able to buy my first house because my parents were able to buy their first house. And they built equity over a period of time. And when I went to buy my first house, I went to First National Bank of Mom and said, can you loan me some money for a down payment?
Right.
And my mom grew up dirt poor in the Rondo neighborhood in St. Paul. Why was she able to, loan me money to buy my first house? Because when my dad came back from World War II, he was able to buy a house on the GI Bill in Highland Park. And so, that just kind of, this is why it's so important to understand some of the history of the discrimination in housing, because for the families, particularly African American families, that were denied that same opportunity that my parents had, they weren't able to build equity because they didn't own their own home, and then were unable, when their kids wanted to buy a house, they didn't have any, that equity, First National Bank of mom and dad, wasn't open. And so we really focus a lot on making sure that people have that opportunity, because it's life altering for generations to come, because that family finally has the security and the equity to be able to thrive.
Correct me if I'm mistaken, but I believe that home ownership is still the single greatest financial asset that most Americans have as they watch the appreciation of their home. And many people don't have any money in the stock market per se, or in mutual funds, but they are able to buy a home, and that home appreciating in value, that becomes the primary source of family wealth that is passed on to other generations.
Absolutely, that is exactly right. So you build, not only do you're paying down the mortgage, but hopefully the value of the home increases as well. And so, whether upon your passing or you decide to move into a smaller unit or whatever, when you sell that house, you do have those resources. And it may be, you could use that equity to start a business. You can use that equity to send the kids to college. You can use that equity, to go on a big vacation, whatever you want to do with it, it's yours. But it was because you had that home that you owned that allowed you that pathway to build that equity.
Really important point that home ownership, it's the real foundation of family wealth, if you will.
Absolutely. It is why there is so much wealth disparity, particularly between white communities and communities of color, because it all goes back to rates of home ownership. In Minnesota, 75% of white households own their own home. And for families of color, it's less than 40%. And for African American, multi-generational, we call foundational black families that trace their roots to slavery, that figure is probably in the low 20s. So you have that huge disparity between rates of home ownership, which means huge disparities in the amount of wealth that families are able to have.
And when you go back and look at our history, people assume, well, how come that developed? Everyone has had an equal opportunity to buy a home, but that's not really true. In our past, we had things such as restrictive racial covenants that were later overturned by the courts and by legislatures and by Congress, things that literally prevented people from buying a home even if they had the down payment and were able to get a mortgage.
Right. In 1967 or 68, then Senator Walter Mondale was really the lead on passing the Fair Housing Act. And that was the first time that racial covenants and redlining, restrictive covenants and redlining were actually outlawed in the United States of America. Up to that time, that was fine, that you could say you can't sell to a black family, or name your list of immigrants or whatever it may be. And so while that legal ability to do that went away in the late 60s, the fact of the matter is the residuals of that have existed to this day. And again, partly because that family, as I said, my dad was able to buy a home on the GI Bill when he came back from World War II. The African American soldier wasn't able to because banks wouldn't loan money for you to buy a house in Rondo. Right. And you weren't allowed because of restricted covenants to buy in other parts of the cities.
And it's interesting when you look at the historic patterns, demographic patterns of where people of color live in the Twin Cities. That's no accident. That was the deliberate result of public policies and policies by mortgage lenders that restricted people of color to particular neighborhoods, including the near north side of Minneapolis, South Minneapolis, Selby Dale neighborhood in St. Paul.
And then if you were able to buy a house in the Rondo neighborhood, we came and built a freeway through your front yard. and
or 35W right through the middle of South Minneapolis.
That's right. Yeah.
Very interesting. Well, there are some other factors that are affecting affordability of housing too that aren't really related directly to the cost of building a house. Let's talk about a few of those. Just general increases in cost of living, they impact a family's ability to save for a down payment, don't they? Things such as the cost of gas, electricity, food.
Yeah, so when we work with a family, and again, we always say we have to bust a few myths about Habitat for Humanity. We don't give houses away. We work with our families to make sure they have a mortgage that they can afford. Jimmy Carter was our number one volunteer. He didn't start Habitat for Humanity. Those are the two biggest myths. But what we do is we work with families to make sure that the mortgage is tied to 30% of the household income. And that is because of all those other costs, books for school,
Right.
clothing, food to put on your table, gasoline, transportation, heating bills, all of those things that go into, that you have to pay for. And if you're paying 50% of your household income for your mortgage, or your apartment even, then it makes it very difficult to afford some of those other necessities of life.
Right, and people having to make that terrible trade-off between, do I buy food, do I buy school supplies, do I buy clothes, do I pay my mortgage on time? With the affordability crisis, do we see evidence in the Twin Cities or in Minnesota of an increase in the rate of foreclosures right now?
We don't, I'm not sure how's that is tracking right now. I haven't noticed an increase, and certainly for our clients, because I always say the secret sauce of Habitat is we build relationships with our clients and our families, and so if there is a situation where there's a job loss and a temporary loss of income, we make sure those families, we work with them to make sure that they don't lose their house as a result of it. So at Habitat, we have almost a 0% default on our loans.
That's really fantastic. Some of the relief that was given to homeowners came about during the period of COVID from 2020 to about 2023, 24, and some of those assistance programs that were provided, like, wasn't there a moratorium on foreclosures for a while?
Yeah, I believe so.
And there was also a moratorium, as I recall, about evictions from rental properties.
Correct.
Too. But I think most of that relief, temporary relief, it's all expired now.
Yeah.
So
right.
the market is at play, if you will.
Yeah, and certainly I think if we were to see an economic downturn, I think we would see a pretty significant spike in rates of foreclosures. We're starting to see some layoffs. Target recently laid off 1,800 employees.
Yeah.
Others are, I see it seems like we're reading more about that. So I'm hoping that's not a bellwether of a significant downturn in the economy, because we'll start to see those foreclosures if that happens.
Right. Chris, I meant to ask you earlier too, how many people are on your staff at Habitat? How many people work for the organization? And also, how many volunteers help Habitat every year? Do you have some data on that?
Yeah,
for us?
well, first of all, we tell you a little bit about Habitat. It's an organization that is more than just building homes, although that's a part of it. We also repair homes for families that need some assistance on that. If a roof is leaking and they can't afford to replace it, or they might need a new furnace or some of those things, we'll work with families to help them repair those homes. So we have that program. We have 3 restores. So we just opened up our 3rd restore in Brooklyn Park. We have a restore in New Brighton and in South Minneapolis. If you don't know what a restore is, think of Menards meets Goodwill.
Right.
So if you're looking for tools or furniture
Supplies.
or supplies,
Yeah.
you can we have paint, we have flooring, we have all kinds of things. It's a great place to go, particularly if you're a do-it-yourselfer. Go to the restores. We have mortgage counseling programs. We have an education component. We have our construction staff. We're currently in building around the Twin Cities I think over 90 homes right now. That are under construction. So you think about all of those construction leads, and then they're supervising our incredible group of volunteers, and we have, I think, 15,000 unique volunteers every year that come out to Habitat. You might come out from your church community, you might come out from your office, you might come out just a group of friends volunteering. We have specialty builds, we call them. We have women builds, so women will be working on the house. We have a lot of our local breweries came together to sponsor a home every year. They call it the House That Beer Built. And that's always the funnest group to hang around. And then
Of course, the beer drinking is after we finish the
always
work.
after you put the power tools away,
Right.
and then the beer can come out. And then we have volunteers that have been working with us for years. We have 3M volunteers or 3M retirees that have been volunteering with us for over 30 years, just completed their 60,000th day of volunteer service.
Oh my goodness.
We figure that's about 150 plus years of volunteer work and they're very skilled volunteers. We have a group called Bud's Bunch, which was one of the original, what we call regular crews that have been working out for years. So our volunteers are the backbone of our organization.
And as I mentioned to you earlier, some years back, my wife Bonnie and I had the privilege of volunteering for Habitat. We worked on a home in North Minneapolis. And I don't have, people who know me know that I am not mechanically skilled whatsoever. I have no crafts background. But I was still able, my wife and I were able to help do painting, do lawn work and other things. So really your point about you don't have to be skilled to be a volunteer and to contribute to Habitat's work is really an important point for people to consider.
Absolutely. Well, I see it every day that I'm on a site. People will come out and they'll say, well, I just want to paint because I don't have any, and they might start off painting,
Right.
but then we might say, well, we need this board cut over here. And by the end of the day, they're using power tools and
Learning some new
and
skills
nail
that they didn't
guns
have.
and yeah, it's a very empowering thing. If you haven't volunteered for Habitat, it's a rewarding day
Right.
for a couple of reasons. One is because you do gain new skills, but you're making a difference in the life of a family that will call that home.
Very important. And I think all of us, we remember buying our first home. It's something you never forget when you sign the mountain of paperwork and sign the paperwork to get your mortgage and that. But it's a great achievement.
Yeah.
And
Well, and so many of our families never imagined that they'd be able to buy a home.
Right.
But then they hear about Habitat and they say, well, wow, maybe that dream that I thought could never happen actually could happen. And there's nothing like being at a home closing where those keys are handed over to the new homeowner, and knowing that they're providing that stability for their children that comes with home ownership.
very proud moment. And I would guess for some of your families, maybe many of them, that it's the first time anybody in their family has owned a home. Perhaps they've been renting previously.
Absolutely. That's a huge component of it.
Yeah. I want to talk too, we talked earlier about racial disparities in home ownership. Twin Cities Habitat, you have a particular program, don't you, that's aimed at advancing Black home ownership, and it's called the Advancing Black Home Ownership Program. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's a recognition again of the history that we have lived through. Certainly since the origins of this country, but if you look at again, post World War II, where the rates of home ownership rose substantially, and the inability of a lot of our families of color that were unable to buy a house because of those restrictive covenants that we talked about, because a bank wouldn't lend them money, or lost their home because where we built freeways. All of those things that went into it. And yet we see the disparities that are among the worst in the country here in the Twin Cities, that really are preventing, I think, us from having the kind of community that we all want to have. When you think about home ownership, I think about the stability that comes there. It's good for our neighborhood. If people, we love all kinds of housing. We love rental housing, and for families. That's appropriate for some families. But when you have home ownership, you're more invested in your community. You're more likely to take care of things. It's a benefit.
Pride
all
of
around.
ownership.
Pride of ownership.
Yeah, it's a real thing.
And right.
Yeah.
And again, that stability. And we see, I think about it during COVID when people were able to come back to the house that they grew up in, if they had lost their job or something like that. That if we didn't have that home ownership, they might not be able to they might have been out on the street, quite frankly.
Chris, we're down to about less than 5 minutes. I want to ask you, so if a viewer is watching this interview right now with you and they're wondering, would I qualify for working with Habitat for Humanity? What are your qualifications to work with a family that wants to realize the dream of home ownership?
You have to not have owned a home previously, or at least not within the last 3 to 5 years, I think it is. So first-time home buyer, generally. Between 30 and 80% of area median income, which for a family of 4 nowadays in the Twin Cities is $100,000 or approximately. You have to have lived in the Twin Cities for over a year. But and there's a few other qualifications, but those are the biggies. You come to twincitieshabitat.org. You can go online and see if you qualify for that. Our families are the folks you see every day. They're folks that you see driving buses. They're working in our schools. They're working in our hospitals. They're hardworking families that because of the cost of housing just aren't able to achieve that dream of owning a home on their own. So you may not think Habitat is for you. It may well be for you.
Mm-hmm. Really important point. We're talking about working families, people who are working but just aren't making enough to be able to realize this dream of home ownership.
That's right.
So Chris, people may be watching this and thinking, where can I get in touch with you if I'm interested in volunteering or finding out about what volunteer opportunities you may have in the Twin Cities Metro?
Right. So if you're watching and you're interested either in pursuing buying a home, coming out and volunteering, donating, we love our generous community that supports the work that we do. Go to tchabitat.org and begin the journey.
Mm-hmm. And if I were to ask you this question, where do you hope to see Habitat in the next 5 to 10 years? Where would you like your organization to go? What would you like to be able to tell us 5 to 10 years from now?
Well, one piece of our strategic plan is to increase the number of units that we're providing for families, the number of people that we help get into a home ownership situation. We served almost 140 families last year that actually achieved home ownership. So we'd like to continue to grow that until everybody that wants to own a home has that opportunity to do so.
Mm-hmm. And how many homes has Habitat completed in Minnesota in the Twin Cities area?
So since our inception over 40 years ago, we have served 2,000 families to get them into home ownership. It took us 10 years to do the first 100. It took us 10 months to do 100 homes last year.
That's really remarkable when you think about the scope of work that's involved. And also, do you work with mortgage lenders to work with families to get them lined up with a mortgage?
Well, we actually have a mortgage product at Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity that we work with the homebuyers. We issue the mortgage, then we continue to service the mortgage. We have a partnership with now Old National Bank, Old Bremer Bank. So they buy the mortgages, but we continue to service them. So it is a Habitat mortgage product that our families will be using.
That's really great, especially for somebody who's never purchased a home before. I mean, you actually are doing 2 transactions trying to buy a house, but you're literally buying a mortgage, which is buying the money that you need to be able to close on the house, right?
Yeah, right.
Two separate transactions in a way, and people may be intimidated or afraid to go out on their own, not knowing necessarily what questions to ask, what the process is.
Well, and that's one of the reasons why we have home buyer education programs. So it's really learning about what it means to take on a mortgage, what it means to have to make sure you pay that mortgage every month. We also have classes online for people to learn how to do basic home repairs, which is really really helpful to learn how to fix a toilet or a sink that's leaking or any of those things.
Maybe I should go look at that website the next time I have a problem.
We encourage everyone to learn how to fix their toilet.
Chris Coleman, President and CEO, Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity, thank you for the work that you and your organization and your tremendous volunteers do and how it enriches our community here. Thank you for being our guest today again on Access to Democracy. And to our viewers, you'll find more Access to Democracy interviews at our website at accesstodemocracy.com. Thank you for joining us.